I got.
Okay.
Hey, welcome. We have got everything happening here. Welcome to Wired In. We've been taking some time Wednesdays to do a live stream and talk about issues and talk about questions that we're all facing right now in this strange business time. We're here with Brandon Borland and Brian Robinson. Hey, guys.
What's
Hey guys,
up?
what's happening?
So Brandon and I were having a conversation earlier, and it kind of spawned a lot of these questions that we're going to talk about today. Brandon, kind of recap maybe what we were talking about.
Well, I think there's a whole new world that we've entered into. And last week we sat down and we talked about working remotely, right? That was kind of the new topic that was hot for everybody. So how do businesses and how do individuals adjust from working in an office environment or working even in a manufacturing environment? We're seeing a lot of manufacturing slow down and that sort of thing. And how do they go from working 9 to 5 every day or whatever their schedule is to being at home, and the challenges related to their information technology, connecting to their office, working with kids. That's what we talked about last week. And it's amazing how much can change in a week, right? I mean,
Right.
right now, how much can change in an hour?
Yeah.
And here we are a week later, and we're not just talking about working remotely anymore. I mean, we're still talking about that, but now we're talking about, okay, how are we going to do this and adapt for a
Right.
little bit longer period than we might have originally thought or hoped?
Yeah.
And that spawned some questions. Like how do, as a business, how do I adapt my marketing and sales strategy, so that it works remotely or from home? How do I adapt communications and culture? I mean, people are spread out now, right? And how do we keep connected, and how do we keep the culture going too? We talked about the technology last week, but what about the culture? What about that communication? How do I adapt my business plan? And then, of course, the really big question: is it all going to be okay? Right? Is it all going to be okay? And I don't know if we have good answers, but I think we have a few answers, and I'm excited to get a chance to bat a few ideas back and forth with you guys.
Sounds
Well,
good.
and I think the big question is we know everything's going to go back to normal, but what is that going to look like? And
Right.
what's not going to change? We've had these kind of cataclysmic changes in the past, and on the other side, everything's okay, but it's not always the same. So maybe we have a lot of questions today and not a lot of answers, but these are questions that we have to prepare for and start asking now because now's the time to prepare for them.
And if you think about our audience is really, what we want people to glean from this is, they may be challenged with running a business or running a facility. I mean, that's a lot of what we talk about is facilities and the different things there. And I think that, yeah, we might have a lot of questions today, maybe not a ton of answers. We have a few, I think. I think we have a few insights.
Yeah.
But I think sometimes it's good just to ask the questions, right? Because sometimes we really can't start to get the answers and get things going until we've started to ask questions. So maybe even just in that alone, right? That might be something new in our new normal. You said normal, but I'm sitting there going normal.
Yeah. Nothing is normal right now. That's all we have
Right.
to go by. So I
Yeah.
think the first question we asked here is, how do I adapt my marketing strategy? How do I start to adapt now to what looks like things are going to be normal?
Yeah. Yeah. And this is Brian. And it's funny because we just had this conversation. I mean, we've had this recently, but we just talked about this morning. So how do you adapt to marketing today, and how do I adapt from this morning to this afternoon?
Yeah.
But I kind of broke it down into four things that I was thinking about. Um, there, be flexible, be considerate, be empathetic, and be perseverant is what I broke it down to. So
Is
for
perseverant
flexible,
a word? Did we just
I
make that
believe it
word
is.
up?
I actually looked it up before I said it. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, maybe
So
explain what you mean by those.
Yeah, so for flexible, so a lot of companies, a lot of businesses have content, obviously produce content online through social media. A lot of companies have content calendars. We at FSG have a content calendar, and right now our content calendar is scheduled out for 2020, but it's certainly a time right now to take a look at what's on the calendar and be able to adjust and say, um, maybe in this next 2 months, take a look at the content we have rolling out. What are the things that we might need to reconsider that aren't timely? And then what do we need to produce to get on the calendar? And some of these wired in discussions, I think, it's us flexing and trying to flex to just being the guide and just listening and not just putting content out to put content out.
So it's flexibility, but it's also kind of listening and using that to reprioritize what
Yeah,
we're doing
definitely.
and what we're saying. Is that what you're saying?
Absolutely. Yeah. And I was going to say, and this will affect strike a balance. So this affects the 4 points. This goes all the way across. Like we don't right now in any time, we don't want to be, we don't want to be too negative in our content right now, but we also don't want to be so opportunistic or ignorant of what's going on that we swing the pendulum the other way. So we want to strike a nice balance. And what you said is right, Brent, listening to what our customers are saying, what, everything's telling us right now should dictate how, what kind of content we produce.
Well,
Well,
both
Brian, I want to
I was
ask
going
you
to say,
because
oh, go ahead.
I was reading this morning. I'm sorry, Brent. I was reading this morning, talking about, I mean, a lot of the content that we're seeing out there on social media and the news, et cetera, is related to the virus, related to business slowdowns, all that. I mean, it's the topics we all know today, right? This is, and for anybody that watches this out in the future, this is April 1st, 2020, right? But the question that I have for you kind of comes from what I was reading this morning. And this particular writer was talking about not being afraid to talk about other things in your marketing and content. I mean, what do you think about that? Like, I mean, how does a company pivot or it's almost kind of like carefully ignore, right? Like carefully acknowledge what's going on, but not, but not lose their focus on their product or service. What do you think about that?
Yeah, no, I agree with that. And I think I'll use, if I can say the name of the brand, but Chipotle, I just did it, came out with a deal, and they right now they're offering Zoom meetings, and they're having free or they're having virtual lunch parties right now. And they have celebrity guests, they're giving away free, gifts and all these things. So Chipotle is an example of they're still building brand loyalty, and they're still they're addressing the situation by they have to go virtual, but they're not being ignorant of it. But at the same time, they're still building a positive community, right? And a positive message. And so I think that's exactly right.
Well, I think there are things that connect us besides the virus. And if all we talk about is the virus and our situation, that's the only thing that connects us. I know this came up. I talk with a lot of churches, and this is a huge topic of communication right now is, everyone's communicating messages of how to deal with fear or fear not, or, everything's under control. But some people made some comments that were like, man, I just want to hear a sermon about finances right now. That would be so refreshing to let me know that things are going to go back to normal.
Yeah, I mean, if you recall, I think everybody's got a pretty short memory that's watching. There's so many people on social right now, more than ever before. During the first couple of weeks of this, once the realization set in, everybody was talking about the same thing. And I think that people want to hear a different message. I mean, yes, we acknowledge it, but we want to hear something. There's other things going on in life. There's families, there's the work still goes on. And when we do move forward to whatever that new normal is, there is something to look forward to. So I think people do want to hear some different things. And part of us as marketers, we can still help and we can still guide with our content without going into, those same trenches of the negativity.
And I think kind of going back to what Brandon said, it's easy right now to concentrate on what's missing.
Yeah.
We're not going into work. We're not doing this. We're not doing that. But we could just as easily concentrate on what we have an abundance of right now and
Yeah.
concentrate on, what this time is situated for. And one of those things is to take a chance to stop and rethink how we do business, stop and rethink about relationships. Because, if anything, like you said, this is a great chance to check our priorities in terms of. Sorry, my phone just turned off. Check our priorities in terms of what's important to our culture, what's
Yeah.
important to our communications, and what we want to say.
Yeah, and one of the things you just said, what's important to our communications. I will not mention the name here, but there was an airline recently, very recently, that had an email automation turned on, and it's one of the things we need to think about in business. There's so many of us that have email drips, marketing drips, and they had an email automation turned on, and it basically said, "Hey, now is the best time to fly," and then it came out like 2 days ago. And so they got some pretty big flack over that. But that's one of the things in our communication is, not just listening, knowing what our customers are saying, but knowing the environment and knowing what's going on and adjusting and making sure we adjust all our channels and that anything that will be affected, right now in our messaging, that we flex those changes.
Well, internal and external. I mean, we're talking about external,
Absolutely.
but this is just as important internally. And I know, Brandon, you're
Yeah.
doing a lot of internal communications now, and empathy is part of this, right?
Oh, it's huge. And there were two things that Brian said that are just really critical right now. And I'm thinking and listening to his comments as a business leader, right? And I'm thinking in my head, okay, so what does flexible mean? Well, flexible means a great example. I mean, this conversation here today was something completely different at 7 o'clock this morning. So
Yeah.
we changed it between
Yeah.
7 o'clock and 3 o'clock in the afternoon. So that's being flexible. But the other thing is exactly what you just said. It's pivoting our message, right? And it's really emphasizing the empathy right now. And I guess that's one of the questions I have for Brian is, to understand how to be empathetic towards our audiences. We have to understand the problem they're facing, right? And
Yep.
the problem has changed in the last 7 days. It's changed in the last 24 hours, right?
Yeah.
So from your seat as and by the way, I think it's probably worth mentioning here to the audience that you're not coming into this without experience. You've got experience in digital acquisition, experience in SEO and search and finding the audiences, right? So what you're talking about here. So I want to ask you, in that experience, as you see it right now, how has the story changed? I mean,
Yeah.
what's the problem that you see now that the audiences might be facing, and maybe businesses aren't thinking about it like that? I mean, our airline friend there that sent out that email, clearly they kind of missed the mark on that. They missed,
Right.
Well, that's not the problem. Problem isn't that people don't want to go fly. They want to.
Yeah.
The
We
problem
would
is,
love to.
we would love to go. We would love to get on an airplane and go somewhere, but that's not the problem.
Yep.
So how do you see the problem changing, and give me something practical a business could take with them when they're thinking about how to change their marketing message or their strategy a little bit in this time?
Yeah. So first of all, you skipped to my number 3. So there was flexible, there was considerate, and I talked about that a little bit in the emails and being considerate, and then empathetic, and having empathy. And so I've worked for Fortune 100 companies. I've been an e-commerce entrepreneur. I've done a lot of things over the years. But one thing that doesn't change is when you build a marketing campaign or you build a message, you build it around the customer first and what they are thinking. So what hasn't changed is the customer is thinking something, and we should be, just like we were 3 months ago, in the heads of what is the customer, putting ourselves in their point of view. What are they thinking? That doesn't change. We should be doing that now, even more so, because to answer your question, their priorities are changing, where they're located physically is changing. If you put yourself in the seat of a target market of who your customer is, it's a possibility that they don't have a need for your product today. So how do you flex in your, either in your marketing message or even in your product, on your product marketing team? How do you flex to that to continue giving the customer what they need at that time? And I think right now is an important time to do that.
Yeah, I heard someone say the other day that, they're in they're on the Titanic bailing water, and someone's trying to sell them light bulbs, or someone's trying to
Yeah.
sell them a new, you know, vacation service. It doesn't. It's the wrong tone for right now, right?
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. Yeah, just again, nothing changes. We as marketers have to, and as business owners, marketing to either a B2B or B2C audience, whatever it is, we have to think from the perspective of the customer. We should always do that, but right now, super critical to think of where are your customers, what their needs and their priorities are today, and then make sure that we respond to that in our message.
Exactly.
Brian, I'll add to that. I think one of the things that's interesting, you said B2B and B2C, and I've been a big fan of saying there is no such thing as B2B. It's B2C on steroids, because
it's a person, right?
Yeah, in a B2C, you're convincing one person. In a B2B or B2C on steroids, you have to convince like 10 people, right? But it's really H to H, human to human, right? We've heard that bounced around a lot.
Absolutely.
And I think one of the things that's really interesting right now that all of us, especially in the business world, need to recognize and remember is this is kind of different from anything. If you think about history and events in the world, we haven't really had many events in the world that affect everybody at the same time across continents.
It's true.
Right.
And in kind of the same ways, right? I mean, we've definitely had world events, but you could have a world event that affects one continent completely different from another. And this one's kind of having the same effect across continents. So I think that's an interesting opportunity for businesses to connect with decision makers, because we're all in this together. I mean, the decision maker is just as baffled by what's going on as the business is. And so at the end of the day, I think that's a really, really good point to bring up and remember. And I've had to really change my thinking on that a lot. Because I'm used to thinking like, well, the customer doesn't understand where I'm coming from as a business, or as a customer, the business doesn't get where I'm coming from. Right now, we're all in the same situation.
Yeah, that's right.
So
we all did our SWOT analysis for our businesses a couple months ago, and this wasn't on the whiteboard when we were talking about that. And that brings up a good point that Brandon said: is it not just the triage of making my business work, it's all of the businesses that support my business, distribution, supply chain, it's all of the businesses that support me coming in, and all of my customers coming out. And like I said, we're all in the same business trying to figure this out, right?
Yeah. And it's that's been probably one of the toughest parts is trying to balance that, right? You've got businesses that are supporting you, and you've got businesses that you're supporting, and we're all kind of in the same boat. So I think that, going back to the empathy question, I think right now empathy, it's kind of weird because I think we all have the same empathy. It's kind of like we're all kind of having the same experience. So it shouldn't be too hard for us to reach into that.
Yeah.
So the really tricky part now is going to be, okay, how do you reach into that without really, offending or alienating? Because that's a really, really hot topic right now, especially for brands. How do we protect brands right now? If we're all experiencing the same thing, the same frustrations, the same unknowns, how do we keep ourselves as a business from messing up and saying something that we shouldn't have said, or posting something we shouldn't have posted, or emailing something we should have emailed?
Right.
You have any practical tips on that, Brian? I mean, have you thought about that? Like some practical?
Yeah, I mean, probably I'd say it probably ties into my fourth thing with the perseverance, but when you talk about that in messaging, sort of in the midst of the storm and like what you said was unique, because we all are we sort of kind of had the same empathy, unlike any other time in the world, if there's a hurricane, Katrina down here, there's all these different things in different parts of the U.S. or the world. We don't necessarily have the same empathy. We're not. We know about some of these events, but we're not necessarily thinking really, firsthand of these things. So, one of the things that that I think it is a good thing to do as a marketer is, continue to build brand loyalty and do so through your content. But it's okay to let customers know that you're still open and operating. But do it with tact. We at FSG, if there's emergency electrical, there's other services that people do need, that essential businesses need. We want to make sure that they know that we are open and we can help them. And so let them, through your channels, let them know you're still open, and
Right.
continue to build brand loyalty. It might look a little bit different, but build it through that empathy, and continue to find ways by listening to the customer, being empathetic, to build brand loyalty. Because in a couple months or however long it may be, there might be a new normal, but we want to be able to be ready, and just continue to be there for our customer, whether it's now or whether it's 6 months down the road. So my suggestion is, don't be afraid to market that, hey, we are here. I have seen some of these come through emails where it's like, hey, I'm an insurance company, I'm still here. And I'm kind of thinking, it's obvious, but at the same time, there are ways in your content to do that.
Well, if, we talk about like the hierarchy of need, and, everyone's that was up here at the top of the pyramid, we're all down at the bottom of the hierarchy of need. We're all just kind of scrambling with, making fire right now. So everything kind of went back to zero. This is a time to simplify and go back to kind of a caveman way of explaining your business. But you know what? Like I said, that can be a benefit. This is a great opportunity to rethink what is essential and to rethink what is simple. I mean, we all spend tons of time wishing we had time to work on our business because we're doing the business. But this can be a blessing of a time to really, we're forced to, figure out and simplify and figure out what's important.
Yep.
What did you mean by perseverant?
Yeah, perseverant. Just keep moving forward. As businesses, we still want to build brand loyalty, whether we are sending the simple message of, here's who we are, we're here to help you, or 6 months down the road, we're building new campaigns. We still want to continue to push. Right. We don't want to become invisible at a time of crisis and disappear and lose some of that brand loyalty. If we're still here to help our customers, and so don't be afraid to let them know that.
And from a communication standpoint, it's one of the things that I think Brandon said this earlier. Everything is personal now. If the voice that your company speaks with isn't a personal voice, if you're not speaking personally to people, I think you're getting lost in the noise right now. I think that's one of the moves in terms of tone that is really necessary. Is this is person to person, like Brandon said.
Yeah, I agree.
Well, and you just really segue really well, because that's the second item, right? I mean, when we start talking about how do we adapt communication and how do we adapt culture, right? It's such a weird thing how personal the world has gotten in the last few weeks. And, I get home, I was out last night with my kids on my front porch, they were playing in the yard till 9:00 last night, on a school night. That doesn't happen in our house. And there's neighbors walking by, and I don't live too far from a freeway, but it was pretty quiet because the freeway is less congested than it normally is. And it's the world has become a lot more personal. And when we are connecting remotely, like we are in this call here, or when we're trying to work things that we would normally be in an office doing, all of a sudden I'm having to be a lot more intentional because I'm talking directly to you, and we had to set up this time, right? We had to set this time aside So I had to, be intentional with my calendar, and I had to be intentional with the things I'm going to say. It's just a really personal world, and all of a sudden it's amplified tone. And you're the one that talks a lot about this, about the tone and how you connect with people, and you can't fake empathy. That's something you say. What do you say?
Well,
to
if
that
you can,
right
I
now?
think I said if you can fake empathy, you can do anything. I think that's what it is, or maybe it was fake honesty. I can't remember.
Well, I guess they're kind of the same thing. But
Well,
yeah, in your experience, Brent, I mean, what do you say to people right now? First of all, starting with that idea, it's a very personal world,
right.
But then how do we stay connected and stay personal, or adapt and stay connected and personal?
Well, I think there's a couple of things. One of the most important ones is know who you're connecting with. There's a lot of times when there's a one-to-one connection. And so even though we're distantly remote, that doesn't mean we have to be emotionally or creatively remote. So find ways to be connected. That's one of the reasons I really liked one of the things Brian said with, find ways to eat together. I know we've talked to some branches and some people that are having happy hour together. They're all pouring a brandy and talking to each other online. Find ways to be emotionally connected and creatively connected, even when you're not physically connected. And I think we have to relearn. I mean, we're just now learning how to text without offending people by the text coming off with the wrong tone or email coming off with the wrong tone. We've got to do the same thing with virtual communications, with what we're talking about now. So I think there's an emotional and a creative quotient that has to be exercised and learned in this time, because people who can't communicate well virtually are not going to be able to communicate going forward. And then when you're in a situation where it's what I call few to few. So say there's a group with 4, 5, 10. Use the right tools. There's nothing worse than being on an email chain with more than 3 people, because someone's going to be left out. So that's why tools like Slack and tools like Google Docs, shared Google Doc. That's why those kinds of tools are super important right now. Not just the face-to-face, not just the video conferencing, and not even the audio conferencing, but how do you keep communicating after? How does that culture keep communicating after that face-to-face meeting? Because there's a lot of our business culture that's that's walking by the door, that's walking by the meeting, or that's picking up from other people. And then when you have that one to many, that broadcast, then understand use the right tools for that. That's what a lot of churches are going through right now. Do I do it live? Do I record it and then present it? How do I connect back with them? We're coming up into the Easter season, and there's a lot of conversations about, I don't want to go into Easter season and remember all of the things I missed, the Easter egg hunts and the Palm Sunday and the Good Friday and the Maundy Thursday. How do we still have those kinds of experiences when we can't physically be together? And what does that mean? What does communion mean if you're not communing? So there's a lot of questions like that in the business side of things, and we have to prioritize those, and we have to find ways to make those same connections work, because I don't think this is just a couple of week problem. We've seen in the past when these cataclysmic world events happen, they leave a residue of change behind. After Watergate, the press was never the same. After 9/11, our travel and security and trust was never the same. So the question is, what's going to be different going forward? And I really think it's going to have a lot to do with how we communicate. And so now is the time to establish that, and now is the time to really figure that out and to exercise that, because otherwise, even when the world starts getting back to normal, we're going to find that some things still don't feel as normal as they did before.
One of the things that when you talk about tone, right, that I think is just a really practical thing. You have to be intentional in
Right.
your mindset. That's what I'm discovering in this right now. When I'm communicating with the team remotely, or when I'm communicating with others within our organization that I may not communicate with regularly, I have to really think about my mindset going into that conversation. If I just got in from driving into work and somebody frustrated me on the road, um, that frustration comes along. It's almost amplified,
Mm-hmm.
right, through remote communication, like a text. Like you said, if I am I frustrated and I respond to a text message, I might say, "Yeah, I got it," and in my mind, I'm thinking, well, I responded to him, but you're hearing like, wow, what a jerk. I just asked, if he had a great night last night. I don't know.
Are you talking about
And
just the letter K? Because that's one of
yeah,
our pet
sometimes
peeves.
that
Yeah.
happens. Sometimes that happens. You guys, yes, sometimes that happens. But the thing is, it's like, when you really stop and think, okay, wait, I need to set my mind right before I start this call here with the video. I need to set my mind right before I send that text or that email. These are things that are common sense that we've known for years, right? If you fire off an email angry, it's not going to go well, right?
Right.
But it's amplified right now because communication still has to be happening quickly.
Yeah.
And I think that is probably one of the most practical things I'm having to learn to do right now, is set my mind. That whole thing where it's like, if you write an angry email, just let it sit overnight and then read it again in the morning, right, before you send it. It's almost kind of like, okay, before you sit down to the chat with your team at 8 o'clock in the morning, type the first line, let it sit for 5 minutes, then look at it again and make sure it's good. Because you're right. I mean, you can't read, when you're in the office together, you can sense like, oh man, he looks irritated. Somebody must have cut him off on the way to work. Or he looks tired. He didn't get much sleep last night. People can pick up all that body language. You don't have that luxury right now. And so I think set the mind right before you write the message, right? Yeah. And my goodness, that will solve so many problems. If you don't do it, it'll cause a bunch of problems. And I'm the first one to admit I'm bad at it. I'm learning. This new normal. I'm learning how to do it.
Well, they say the camera adds 10 pounds. The camera also adds, 10 notches to the emotion of what you're saying. And in this day and age, we have to assume that the listener is got to do the same thing that you just talked about as well. When we're receiving messages, we got to stop and say, well, okay, these are different times. I can't react quickly. I've got to react slowly.
Absolutely. And I think the other thing that's really hard right now is businesses are faced with tough choices, right? And they're faced with making tough decisions, both internally and externally. And how do you communicate those things remotely, right? I mean, it can be really bad to get bad news face to face, or maybe not bad news, but just discouraging news face to face. It's much worse to get it over email or text message or a phone call. And that's kind of what we're forced with right now. We're forced with delivering news and information, be it good or bad, through these remote channels. And that right there that's an art, right? And I think, so I want to ask you this question, Brent, because you've had a lot of experience in creating and in messaging. You have experience, in teaching, a lot of experience in teaching. So I want to ask you, like, what are some practical tips that businesses can take right now when they're communicating good and bad news remotely? I mean, we talked about getting our mindset right first, right? But I mean, how do you actually write the words like, I don't have any work for you right now, or I need you to, how do you do that, in a remote world? But what are some things you would suggest to people?
Well, I think a couple things. The first one, and this is one that we know, but it comes up so often, and that is know who you're talking to, know the setting that you're talking in. There's a big difference between talking to somebody, at a birthday party and talking to someone at a funeral. And we can't control the environment that the listener is in right now. Just like you said, I don't know what my environment is coming in hot for this conversation. I don't know what the environment of the person is that's listening either. So realize that you can't control the person. So that person's listening, and their fear receptor and their uncertainty receptor is turned up to 11. So if if you need to, start with reassuring. Always start with, look, we're talking about this. Don't, because everyone's going to read into everything we say way more than they normally would. So I think that's a part of that. And it kind of goes off of what you were just saying. The other thing is use the right medium for the communication. If we're communicating information, don't try and make it a video call. If we're communicating things where we have to see each other's emotion and we have to see each other face to face, and I have to reassure you by my expression and my body language, it's okay. We're going to be okay. Then that's a video call. That's a great way to communicate that. But if it's, if we're going to have a call about, our numbers, whether they're good or bad, that may be an audio call, or that may just be a report. So, we've got to put the right medium in for the message, communicate the right way. And I think the other thing is just communicate with empathy. We can't tell other people how to feel right now. In business, sometimes we can say, you know what, here's how I want us to respond to this. A lot of times we'll say, okay, we're all in this room, but here's how I want you to respond. We can't do that right now. It's very difficult to manage responses, and be very, very slow. We were talking about this in business messaging. Be very patient and be very slow. Because the situation changes so much. And as we communicate, we have to say, this is the truth right now. It may not be the truth down the road, but things may change. We just got to acknowledge this is not a time to be broadcasting our decrees from on high. This is a time to sit down together face to face and have, honest conversations. And, say, I'm confused too, you're confused too, but we're going to get through this together. Everything's going to be okay on the other end. But I think those are some of the things that we probably should always do. But those are some of the things that we have to especially do. Right now, we were talking on the last call. I'm a single mom. I'm working from home. I'm not a single mom, but someone is a single mom working from home with a lot of responsibilities, and the dog's barking and the kids are here and the doorbell rings. How do I deal with that and deal with business? Well, we have to all acknowledge our situation. We all have to acknowledge this isn't normal time. This isn't how things work. They're not how things are going to work going forward, but we're all in this together. We can't be berating each other because it's not, we have to acknowledge we can't control it. And that has to be okay.
Right. And Brian, I'm curious from your side, the numbers that you're seeing and the data that you're seeing, because this goes back to, as a business person, I'm curious, what are the mediums out there that are really popular? I mean, we know that video and we know that audio and things like what we're doing right here, right now, right, have been around for a little while. But, what are you seeing on the statistics and the different types of mediums people are using to communicate? I mean, I would assume video is up. I don't know for sure. I mean, you're the one watching those numbers. What are you seeing?
Yeah, I mean, these lives like this, Facebook Live and YouTube Live, is at an all-time high. I mean, Facebook is hiring at record numbers right now because the demand is for them for what they do in their service is really high. So the numbers are really high. In social, across the board, social media platforms are the channel where everybody pretty much is right now. I also watch the analytics behind search, whether it be organic search and paid search, and those numbers are down right now. And it's not just down with one company, it's down across. I mean, I'm in a lot of different groups, and it's down across a lot of different industries. It's just, there's just a little down right now, but there's a lot in social, and there's a lot of people. I'm in some other Facebook groups as well, where they do 2 or 3 lives a day. And they didn't do that a month ago. So it's kind of an unprecedented territory. And it's also an opportunity for small business owners to continue to get content out there without having to break the bank, because you can do it with an iPhone. I mean, we have right now, I mean, typically when we're in the office, we have all this camera equipment set up, but right now we can't do that. So you can do it through your webcam, you can do it through iPhone, and you can do YouTube Lives or Facebook Lives as a small business owner to continue to put content out there. Because if you think about building content, it's like seeds that are planted, and you water them, and eventually they grow and they're fruitful. So if we continue to plant and build, that content now, then 2 or 3 months down the road, it's going to bear some fruit.
What would you say to a business owner right now, a small business owner who is, maybe, again, priorities have shifted, right? Maybe they had a really good foot traffic business, and they had really no need to dive into the digital world, but now all of a sudden it's like they can't go to their store, they can't open it, or what have you. What would you say to them are some practical steps to get started to get a marketing department, even if it's just their husband or their wife going, like you just said, low cost, easy? Where would you have them start? Where would you suggest they start?
Yeah, I mean, right now, Facebook channel, for sure, have a Facebook channel if they don't already have it. Google My Business is a place that a small business owner has to be. Some people have created an account on Google My Business. They haven't looked at it. They haven't optimized it. Right now is the time. There's no time greater than the present to get in there and build out those, the Google My Business platform. You can, right now, a small business owner can ask for reviews from previous customers who haven't left a review, and build those reviews up right now when things are just steady. So you can build, there's a lot of things that you can do to build your brand loyalty, and just continue to build around your brand on Google and Facebook and these other platforms while we're kind of at this sort of downtime. It's the perfect time to build content, and it's the perfect time. If you haven't leveraged digital before, now's the time to do it. And just there's so many resources on Google. If you type in, how do I create a Google My Business listing? There's 30, 40 pages of things in Google that that first page will have step-by-step guides to do it. So now's the time to do it. I have some friends that are doing it, and they're stepping it up now even more. I think it's a great time.
Now is also
you just said
probably
something that's
Oh, sorry. I was just going to add real quick. Now is probably also the best time to find someone to help, because there's a lot of people you might not have been able to afford before that are sitting around right now looking for something to do. So, the gig economy is thriving right now, because the guys that you might not have been able to afford last month might be dying to help right now.
Yeah, I completely agree. What were we going to say?
Well, to add to it, I mean, it's a great opportunity even for the bigger businesses right now, right? Yeah. I mean, when you're trying to find something to backfill some of the teams that you need, that maybe some of their productivity is down, but they're still in the office, or they're still online because they need to keep working, support the business. A great way to fill the sales pipeline, or to support the sales team, is Google reviews. That's huge, right? Reach out to the old customers, reach out to the people that and have them drop a Google review, send them an email with the link there, right? You send them a link, and then also it's reaching out, right, to the customers, just going through your customer list and touching base. What a great time to do that! But again, going back to the beginning of our conversation, right? It's like. Right. Don't send the email that it's a great time to fly, because it's not really a great time to fly for everybody. It is for a few people, but not for everybody.
That's right.
And what you careful.
What you just said, that's right. What you said about going back and getting that qualitative data. One of the things, I worked for a Fortune 100 company. We had a sales marketing team that were separate. Like most companies are, the marketing saying, "Hey, I'm sending you great leads," and sales is like, "No, you're not." It's that kind of thing. But the qualitative data, marketing, it not only benefits the sales team to know, they're the boots on the ground that knows what the customers are saying, but marketing doesn't always have that data. There's no time better than right now to dig into the old live chat records, dig into emails, dig into, if you're on a CRM, your Salesforce or whatever it may be, and dig into that qualitative data right now, and start building a better look at your overall, who the customer is and what your messaging is. But that's a perfect time to dig through data right now.
Well, just like I hear people on Facebook saying this is a great time to clean out that closet or clean out those drawers that you haven't gotten to. It's kind of the same thing within business.
Yeah, absolutely. Yep.
Well,
So,
Brent, you said, gig economy a second ago. And,
yeah.
it's one of our notes here, right? Is okay. So how do we adapt to a new business plan, a new business model, or maybe we've got an emerging business model here that's being created? How do we adapt as a business and transition down the road to this new way of doing business? And like we talked about earlier, what are some of the new normals we have to look forward to, right? That, I think, that's our next topic is, adapting the business plan and identifying. So in your view, what do you see as some of the things that are coming down the pipe that, and how can businesses right now adapt where they are to being ready for whatever normal looks like in a few months?
I really think that in the last few years, I guess, especially the last year, we've moved to what's called the gig economy. And that's where you expand and contract your staff based on a project or based on a specific time. I need someone to write for this, but I don't necessarily hire someone full time. And I think we're going to move to more of a model like that because people are going to be afraid, they're going to be shy to bring somebody on full time. So I may bring somebody on for 15 hours. I may bring somebody on for 20 hours. And if you're the kind of person that's in, especially if you're in, I think, a creative position, you may need to be prepared to work 10 hours a week for 4 people rather than 40 hours a week for one person. And I think you need to make sure that you consider yourself a small business, even if you're working at a company. I think that's one of the things that we're going to go towards. And I think the other thing is it's not going to matter as much where you are. We've learned that you can work remotely, even on some projects. I don't think that cow's going back in the barn, as they say here in Texas. I think the move to remote I think that's the phrase. I'm from California. I pretend like I'm from Texas, but I think
it sounded Texas.
Did it sound right? So it sounded good.
Yeah, it sounded good. It sounded really good. And
I'm wearing Birkenstocks instead of cowboy boots, though it probably doesn't work as well.
That's a problem. That's a problem.
I think that's another thing is, remote teams are not going to go away. And so now you're competing for your job with everyone everywhere almost. But you're also, as a business owner, have resources, maybe even not in your same state or in your same country.
Right. And, I think one of the things that's, you talked about, like this new, the cow's not going back in the barn, right? There's so much of that right now that, we can look at. And when I'm thinking particularly about businesses and what are the services and products that are going to be on the horizon that maybe they've always been out there and we've just never really thought a lot about them. And, one of the great examples right now of one cow that stuck out in the pasture is drive-through restaurants, right?
Yeah.
Think about how many drive-through restaurants there are today versus 2 weeks ago, right? Yeah. All of them.
They're all drive-through.
And granted, that's not true across the country. And there are parts of the country where they have had to shut down and they're fighting through that. Here in Texas, a lot of them are still open and they've had to transition. So you've got some of your really big dine-in establishments that have, even mid to high level dine-in establishments now have cones set up in the parking lot and they're running drive-through. Yeah. And, it makes you wonder, it makes me wonder as somebody who works in a business that supports these types of facilities, right? What kind of work is going to be available for us? I mean, how many of these are going to build permanent drive-throughs? How many of these are going to look at it and go, you know what, that model worked and we liked it. We're going to keep doing that. And then on on the office space. How many people are going to come back to the office in a few months and go, you know what, we can reconfigure this office space
Yeah.
because it works a lot better to do it this way. We learned over the last few months. So what kind of opportunity is going to be there? There's also things like right now, we've always known UV lighting. I mean, that's a big topic in our business, electric and lighting. It's always been a big topic for sanitation, kitchens, et cetera. But bringing that kind of into mainstream and having conversations about that, how it can help HVAC purification, how it can help make an entire school building healthier or an entire shopping mall healthier. These sorts of products that have been out there, they're going to become a little bit more mainstream. And so I think, one of the really big things is not just adapting how you work, but what you sell and how you sell it. So it's the companies right now that can pivot on their heels,
Right.
and go, that product that may have been something that sat on the shelf for a long time, and all of a sudden now it's really hot, right? The companies that can really quickly adapt and get that product out the door that's going to be huge moving forward. So I think that that's a really big deal, and it's not just who's working, how they're working, but how the customers are buying.
Yeah.
And I think that right now we need to really pay close attention during this particular time. The next few weeks, we have a front row seat to watch America go through this, and really watch the businesses and see okay, what are the things, right, that we can do right now, thinking outside of the box.
Yeah.
Right. So that we can adapt our business plan coming down the road.
Yeah.
Well, right now is when we adapt. It's not going to be in 3 months.
Well, and I think another thing is, if you're one of those businesses who relies on a convention or a business meeting or some large event to get your word out, I think this is kind of maybe the death knell for those kinds of gatherings. I don't think we're going to see the big conventions and the big trade shows and business shows as much. If that's what you're relying on, you might need to find another way to communicate or another way to get word to the customers.
Oh, I think we'll see a shift. I think it will be a lot like what we're talking about, where I know I've seen a lot of our trade shows have reached out to us with virtual events, right? They're trying to figure out how to still bring in the keynote speakers and the panels and the education, as well as the vendors like us or the companies like us that are selling products and services, but how to do it online, right? And how to do it online at scale, right? Because it's not just like this little group here where there's 3 or 4 of us and maybe 2 or 3 people watching, but it's a couple thousand people watching at once. So I think that's what we're going to see. And again, I think I'm kind of excited about it, in all honesty, because I think it'll make it more effective for both the people hosting it and the people buying and learning from it. And I think that can be true in a lot of ways. I mean, I think it can be more effective sometimes to drive through the nice restaurant than it is to stop and sit out and have a meal.
Well, as you were saying that, Brandon, it's interesting because, their drive-in, of course, I wasn't around in the 50s, my dad was, but drive-in restaurants were hugely popular, obviously, in American Graffiti and Happy Days and everything that I know of it. But we're hugely popular back then, and it's dwindled down to where there's really just 1 or 2 kind of players that I know of in the U.S. that are big. But I'm wondering, is there going to be a shift there? Are we going to see more of those pop up, over the coming, months and years? It's just interesting to think about.
And what other businesses are going to be drive-through that aren't even drive-through now?
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, because I promise you, the sit-down, restaurants that don't have that. There's a few of them here locally that are closed right now because they don't have that capability. So, retrofitting with that capability to become drive-through is probably going to be a pretty popular upgrade here in the next few months.
Who knew that Chick-fil-A was the model for the future? In the future,
that it figured out.
Yeah,
all restaurants will aspire to be Chick-fil-A. Well, in closing, I think maybe just each one of us say, what's one thing you think is the most important thing right now to do or to prepare or to say? I mean, what's the most important takeaway right now that, as a business owner, as a business communicator, that that I do or that I say? Brandon?
Be positive. Be
Yeah.
an optimist. I mean, there's plenty of pessimists. We're overloaded with them. We need optimists right now. And like I just said, I mean, I think about the things we can look at it, like you said a little earlier, Brent. We can look at it and we can go, well, what do we not have, or what are we struggling with? And yeah, I'm not discounting it. I'm not. I mean, it's frustrating and it can be discouraging, and I'm not discounting that what comes with that. But at the same time, flip it around and go, what do we have?
Right.
And I love that the way you said that. And I think that's what we need to do right now. And I think we can do that in business. And I think in business we can emphasize the things that we do have. We can emphasize the ways that we can help. We can and we should emphasize them, and we should emphasize them without agenda. I think it's fair. I think it's fair for everybody to accept that businesses are in business to make a profit. I think that's fair.
Sure.
But at the same time, I think our agenda should not be any more than that. Let's say any more than normal. Trying to make a profit, trying to survive. So we need to do what we can to help. We need to promote that. We need to be positive. We need to be optimists. And that's I think that right there carries a lot more weight than a lot of other things we can do. That's my take, at least.
Brian, did you have something?
Yeah, I mean, I think mine is and it's been heard and said in other conversations, but it's survive and thrive. I mean, I think we are. There have been so many businesses that are around today and that have been around for 100 years because they have gone through these huge downs, and these huge ups and downs, and they've survived. So the whole conversation today about adapting. So as businesses, whether we're a small business, whether we're an e-commerce entrepreneur or a salon, or whether we're a multi-location Fortune 500 company, right now is the time to survive but also to thrive. Like, we don't just want to tread water, but we want to keep building the things that got us here and continue to move forward so that we do thrive.
I think I would say is stay together. Check in on each other. Don't assume that everyone else knows what you know. Don't let information and don't let communication get compartmentalized. There's a lot of times, especially when we're dealing with our part of the business and we're trying, we feel like, we're the only one holding up the pillar that's holding up the building. Don't assume everyone else knows that or everyone else feels that. So we may go through them, we may know, but you got to communicate. You got to stay together. Don't assume other people know. Check in on each other. How are you doing? Just because I know, or just because a couple people know, it doesn't mean we all know. And one of the worst things you can do in terms of communication is not communicate. It's like being in a marriage and assuming that the other person thinks everything's all right. Or being in a marriage and assuming that the other person knows how you feel. Be together. This is a good time to be together. And like we said before, we have some answers and we have some ideas, but it's okay to not have all the answers. But it's not okay to not be together, because what we really need in this is to know we're not alone. There's a joke that feels like, someone started playing a Jumanji game and they need to stop the game so we can all go back to normal. In Greek mythology, Pandora opens the box and all of the stuff comes out. At the very bottom of the box was hope. And, we need to get that, and we need to cherish that with each other, because it can die if we're by ourselves. But we hope exists in community. And so stay together. Find ways to be kind to each other from afar. And that may be, remembering a birthday, or it may be just saying how you doing. But I think that's important.
That's awesome. And I
Thanks,
think,
guys.
I would put the button I would put on that, Brent, is We've done it before, and we'll do it again.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So
Absolutely.
I love it. And we're going to do this again next week, right?
We are. Next
We
week
just don't know exactly what we're going to say next week, but we're going to do it.
we have plans, but if anyone has plans for a week ahead, you know how those go. We have plans to next week talk about distribution and talk about how to handle distribution challenges in this time. Right, Brendan?
Yeah, remote buying. You know, we're used to Amazon. We're used to the world of you know, buying in our pajamas. It's really been amplified lately, right? I mean, it's really been amplified. So translating that into business, you know, I mean, it's been around for a while, but it's just a great time to talk about, you know, remote buying, distribution, remote warehousing, logistics, all that sort of thing. So we've got a couple of guests that are going to come talk to us about that and kind of what their take on what businesses can be doing now. And like we've talked about today, how businesses can adapt moving forward.
As always, like and subscribe. That way you'll know when these things go live. You'll know when these things, you can ask us these questions and you can be involved in the conversation. Share this if you know people that would like to hear this kind of information, or if there's topics that you're wondering about that you really would like us to cover. We'll find the subject matter experts, because Wired In, it's become our catchphrase that the first step to every project is talk to someone who knows what they're talking about. So we'll find those people for you, and we'll get through this together. As Brandon said, we'll get through this. We're here with you.
I hope we didn't break that rule today. I hope we really didn't break that rule today.
Bye-bye. We'll
Thanks,
see you
guys.
soon.